Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, live here in Orlando at Hilton Bonnet Creek Hotel, Signia by Hilton Bonnet Creek, I think is the official name of this place. But here live in the media room and Radio Row, really should be Podcast Row. No one's doing radio in 2025, but so much news breaking for the Colorado Rockies. Not a ton on the roster side, but today speaking with manager Warren Schaeffer and new president of baseball operations, Paul DePodesta, a lot of information coming out in the world of the Colorado Rockies. So if you've got any questions, concerns, go ahead, levy them my way here in the chat. If you're over on the X side of things, go over to YouTube to pump those numbers up just a little bit. But I think you can still ask a question on Twitter. Felix, first one, signing in as always. Good to see you, buddy. A lot of stuff coming out, all of which was very promising. Things for the Colorado Rockies feel good, feel hopeful. And this is really the first winter meetings in quite some time where the Rockies are doing some things. They're making news. There's something to talk about. It isn't the same old, which it's been for seemingly 5+ years. And this has been very much a breath of fresh air. And I think that's true for media side. I think it's true for folks who work for the Rockies, and probably most importantly for the fans of the Colorado Rockies. And the day didn't get it started until later on in the afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sitting down, talking with Warren Schaeffer in a nice scrum with a lot of Denver media, another indicator that things are getting a little bit better for the Colorado Rockies with the amount of folks actually coming out to spend their money or their company's money, their company's dime, to cover the winter meetings and talk about the Colorado Rockies. One of the biggest subjects for Colorado over the course of today, over the course of Monday, is the roster, specifically first base. Where can the Rockies improve upon their power? Where can they upgrade? And certainly a team that lost 119 games can upgrade in a lot of different places, but first base seems to be that spot where they might be able to find an immediate impact bat. It's crazy to think that the Rockies and Rockies fans are longing for the days of CJ Cron, of 25 to 30 home runs, 90+ RBI. If you can have a guy like that in the middle of your lineup, that will make everybody else around them that much better, protect those players in the lineup. For now, both Warren Schaeffer and Paul DePodesta talking about, hey, Blaine Crim, he showed up really nice in September, and hey, we got a guy down in AA by the name of Charlie Condon. Sometimes he's been named, other times not so much, but those guys are very well going to be in the conversation for that position. I think a lot of that is not lip service, but certainly putting on a front to first basemen that are free agents right now, or even teams that are looking to move on from their first baseman. Jake Cronenworth can play a slew of positions, but he's also can play some quality first base. If the Padres are looking to dump some payroll, well, the Rockies don't necessarily need Jake Cronenworth because, according to them, they've got Blaine Crim, they've got Charlie Condon in the pipeline on his way to the majors. So the Rockies saying the right things, playing their cards very much in the right way. In fact, DePodesta said, you know what? As soon as everybody in this room, as part of the Denver media, leaves my suite, I'm going to be talking with the representatives for a lot of free agent first basemen. So the Rockies definitely are going to address that, I think, in a really good way. In the chat, this offseason definitely has been a different feeling, exciting feeling. For sure. Can't deny that. So there's going to be competition. And that's the thing, whether it's Crim, Condon, or a third option. Troy Johnson, we know, is on the 40-man roster, or maybe you don't know that name very much, but he was selected off waivers from the Miami Marlins. But competition is going to be everywhere, and there should be, with how poorly the team played overall, and with really the only exceptions for not being any competition right up the middle. Hunter Goodman behind the plate, Ezekiel Tovar at shortstop, Brenton Doyle in center field. That's it. Those are the only guys that really have a job for next year. This wasn't discussed exactly, but even if you look at the starting rotation, it's probably Kyle Freeland and it's definitely Kyle Freeland, but it's probably Chase Dollander there. And if Ryan Feltner is healthy, then he is going to be in there. Other than that, it's completely wide open. Apparently, Ryan Feltner is recovering well, which is good to hear, because I think he could be a major catalyst for getting the Rockies back to somewhat respectability. Right, 63 wins isn't going to be respectable because you lost 99 games, but that's a major turnaround in terms of wins. So I think a healthy Ryan Feltner is going to be big, and so far he has sounded like he's been healthy. In addition to adding a first baseman, Warren Schaeffer acknowledged that adding veterans is going to be something that's important to surround young players by, learning how to win ball games. And, Tuesday is a World Baseball Classic media day. And I do expect to ask a couple questions about a certain Rocky in particular, who I do believe is on one of those early rosters, reserve rosters, 35-man contingency rosters, if you will. So I am curious about that. And I actually asked Schaeffer as we were walking to Paul DePodesta's suite about the World Baseball Classic, and hey, would you rather those guys, come to camp to get all the ducks in a row your first year? And Schaeffer was quick to virtually shut me down and say, no, I want those guys to go out there. I want them to play. And of course, after thinking about it for a while, I thought, for virtually this entire roster right now, the 2025 Colorado Rockies that are coming back for 2026, they don't know how to win. And so if they're going to go and play for their country, they have a chance to win some meaningful ball games and maybe even win a championship, something that so many of them have not done as professionals. So there could be a lot of value for several of the Rockies right now to go out and contribute on a World Baseball Classic roster. So I'm very much intrigued to see if there could be anybody out there. There's one person in particular, and I've sort of hinted at it before, but one player that I think could go out, contribute for his country, and maybe even do some big things in there. Nate in the chat, good to see you as well. What is a realistic target for the Rockies at first base? I sort of joked that Luis Ariz could be that player that the Rockies would sort of stamp the Daniel Murphy label upon and say, oh, if this guy is already won 2 batting titles for 2 different franchises, that he comes to Coors Field, he's more likely than not going to win another batting title. And the Rockies don't need someone to win a batting title, but they do need somebody to make contact. That is something that they are looking to do. They want to put the ball in play. They want to put more pressure on the defense. You don't get killed by home runs at Coors Field, because they can go both ways. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the singles that drop in that should be outs. It's the singles that become doubles, the doubles that become triples, right? So having a guy that can provide a lot of contact and even provide an approach that can help everybody in the entire lineup, that's got a lot of value. So I think Luis Ariz might be at the top of that list, and I don't think he's going to be that expensive. Even if not, Josh Bell's name has been out there, Nathaniel Lowe. There could be other trade targets. As I said, I wouldn't count out someone like a Jake Cronenworth if the Rockies won't go on and take a bad contract on in order to acquire some prospect capital. All of those things could be potential. Luke in the chat on YouTube, sad to see Bernabel go, but I was glad to see some decisions made quickly on some question mark guys. In fact, that was a question that was asked to Warren Schaeffer on Monday about moving on from the likes of not just Warming Bernabel, but Drew Romo and Michael Toglia, maybe more importantly. And Schaeffer had one, this was one of the better responses to a question was, I like the establishment of direction. It's something we can all get behind, because under Bill Schmidt, there was not any establishment of a direction. There were hints, there were rumors of, we're going to kind of do, we're going to try to get better. We got to get this guy better. We got to get healthy. No real game plan as to how to improve those areas of need, how to make progress. No actual game plan. Talk of getting better, but what was the game plan? And I think, moving on from some of these players that the new administration, or maybe even some people in the old administration whose voices weren't heard and have since been elevated, these guys are not a part of the future. So let's let them go rather than hang on to them, hold on to them, because Bill Schmidt, who was the general manager, drafted these players when he was head of the draft department, right? Head of scouting. So now there's not that relationship, and it's just a matter of, what have you done for me lately? What are you going to do for me in the next couple seasons? And if you're not going to be providing value, then you are just blocking the path of somebody else, of somebody that can contribute to wins and losses in 2026. So this is an indication that it's not going to be the same old with the Colorado Rockies by no two ways. While the innocent saying Rhys Hoskins would fit well at Coors Field, he certainly could be one of those guys that would mash. But look, first base isn't a position necessarily where you are going to get a lot of contact and a lot of high average. But one of the things that Paul DePodesta said was, strikeouts aren't all bad, right? If you are providing power and you are driving in runs, you will take 80 plus strikeouts, maybe even 100 plus strikeouts if you're getting a lot of production. There are plenty of players that you look that lead the league in strikeouts that are still providing a lot of value because they're hitting for power. But if you're not hitting for power, you simply cannot strike out. Bottom line. Schaeffer was asked about taking advantage of Coors Field immediately, and this goes back to what we've been talking about: putting the ball in play, more contact. That is a huge piece. Chase Dolander's name came up, and Schaeffer said he's going to be a really good pitcher. And when you look at his numbers, when they were on the road, his ERA was just a little bit above 3. It was only at Coors Field, which is going to be half of his games, where he was really bad, an ERA north of 9. So he's got a lot to learn. And it was said, in spring training or early on that, there's not that much that he can learn at AAA, if anything. So he can get his teeth kicked in Albuquerque, or he can get it kicked in Denver. And he got it kicked in Denver. So be it. He's going to learn from that. He's going to have a bounce back in his sophomore year. I do firmly believe that. And Schaeffer is of that belief as well. How about Chris Bryant? On the road to recovery, that's about it. Not much to say. There was a follow-up question about preparing for Chris Bryant, right? How do you plan for him? Do you plan for him to be on the roster and contribute, or do you have to plan for him to not be anywhere near playing shape? And the answer was essentially plan in a couple ways, right? Try to have the contingency plan for both scenarios. Although I think everyone firmly believes that he will not be returning and we will not see him play for the Rockies again. Could we see him in a Rockies uniform standing along the first baseline? Perhaps. That would then mean he would get introduced during the home opener. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Hunter Goodman, I asked about what he needs to do in 2026 beyond just repeating his 2025, which again, that would be great if he can repeat what he did in 2025. Even if he was, say, 90% as productive, that's huge. That's critical to have 2 seasons like that out of your catcher. But Schaeffer ultimately saying becoming more of a leader and showing those leadership capabilities, his teammates are looking at him like a leader. That's going to be critical for Hunter Goodman going forward this season. It was also followed up if he'll continue to be used as a DH type on off days. And yeah, Schaeffer's looking for Goodman to be in that Cal Raleigh type role, not Cal Raleigh production, because look, nobody except Cal Raleigh has produced 60 home runs out of the catcher spot as a switch hitter. So I think they're going to continue to try to find creative ways to get off days for Hunter Goodman. And with only 2 catchers right now currently on the 40-man roster, Goodman and Braxton Fulford, I am kind of curious to see if maybe they go the catcher route for the Rule 5 draft. And going 3 catchers is not very common amongst major league teams in 2025, 2026. But if you've got a guy like Goodman who can also DH, maybe that changes the math just a little bit, right? And if you're getting much better productivity out of your starting infield, then maybe you only need 1 utility infielder. And maybe that utility infielder can play the outfield as well. So you can have that luxury of going with 3 catchers when one of those catchers is a Silver Slugger Award winner. You've got that. The bullpen, one of the biggest strengths. I asked about Seth Halverson, whose season ultimately ended on August 2nd with an elbow strain. Apparently, Seth Halverson feeling great. Coaching staff, moves are being made behind closed doors, according to Warren Schaeffer, and we learned a little bit more late on Monday night with a second confirmation about a new pitching coach. I'll get to that in just a moment. Paul DePodesta, talking in his suite, was asked about the coaching staff. Obviously, that's the real next major to do. Certainly the roster needs to be improved, but there needs to be certain coaches in place. Warren Schaeffer is going to be a big part of picking his coaching staff, which he has done with the pitching coach. I'll get to that in a moment. But DePodesta says that ultimately they need to reimagine leadership at both the MLB and the MILB levels. We'll see what happens with that. It also does sound like Nick Wilson and Jordan Pacheco, who were co-hitting coaches last year, are going to return in some capacity. Not exactly clear if they're going to be on-field coaches for the Rockies, if they're going to go back down into the minor leagues, but it does sound like they will return in some capacity. Fireworks for the Rockies. They ultimately, really since the 2000 winter meetings, when the Rockies signed Mike Hampton, Rockies have not made a ton of fireworks, virtually none. There was a document that was shared for everyone at the winter meetings about big splashes and moves made at the winter meetings in years past. And so I did a Control F on all of those major moves, and there really was none. But one of the biggest ones, I guess, in the last decade was when they signed Jason Mott and Chad Qualls on the same day. Like maybe that was big. You'd have to go back to trading Houston Street away in 2011, the winter meetings of 2011. So after that Mike Hampton signing in 2000, I think the Rockies have been shell-shocked a little bit and haven't been known to make big splashes. And, when asked that question about making the splash, DePodesta, showing his personality, made a joke like, hey, wasn't signing and hiring Josh Burns big enough of a splash? So funny moment there. DePodesta talking about player acquisition, going to be meeting with some representatives of first basemen, but first and foremost, they need to improve their starting pitching. That is the biggest piece. He also added that, some of the pitching leadership that they bring in could end up getting a lot more out of the current starters, some of the depth. And yes, that would make you feel a lot better. That does sound a lot like, things that the previous administration said with under Bill Schmidt of, hey, we just got to get better. At least now there's an avenue. Like, how do they just get better? They just got to get better. Well, no, again, you're seeing the differences from this leadership. Well, if we get a new pitching coach or pitching coordinator that can see certain things and use various analytics and use his eye to say, hey, try this, not that, we might be able to get a lot more productivity out of our starting pitchers. And you go, oh, okay, that's how you actually, quote unquote, do better, right? Position players, sounds like they've got some flexibility. That could be an area where maybe the Rockies are able to make a trade and deal from some of that relative depth. I don't think it's a ton of depth, but it's certainly more of a depth than the starting rotation is right now. Speed is an area that the Rockies have talked a lot about, stealing more bases. DePodesta pointed out that speed doesn't just show up on the bases, it also shows up on defense. You do have that certainly as an option in terms of contributing to the team in more ways than one. Willie Castro, a player that Jorge Castillo is reporting Colorado has interest in, along with Atlanta, in Pittsburgh. Did steal 33 bases in 2023. He's a few years away from that. Was an all-star with the Twins in 2024. Was a little bit all over the place in 2025. He might be a more affordable option than a player that I floated, a Ramon Urias, as being that guy that can play some middle infield, be the utility infield type guy that can steal bases at the same time. We'll see if Willie Castro ends up landing with the Rockies. Rocks Chalk saying in the chat, this regime would have designated for assignment Rymack in 2021. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. Rymack shouldn't have been designated for assignment even by the Yankees standard. So, but to your point, they're being a lot more aggressive, saying, hey, if you're not getting the job done, we're going to move on regardless of what we've invested. It's the sunk cost fallacy. So look, if you're not getting it done, we're not going to have you around. And I think that's somewhat of a breath of fresh air for everybody. It's going to put a lot more pressure on certain guys, but hey, pressure makes diamonds, as we know. Also in the chat, Rockies have the first pick in the Rule 5. Any insights on the best available player? They could go just about anywhere, right? There are some bats that could be very interesting. I know there's always a handful of AAA first basemen that rake, and you go, well, hey, that's a league average, or wins above replacement. That's a replacement level type first baseman, and you could get a 25 home run guy potentially out there. Specifically, have I looked at the list? No, it very much can be somewhat of a crapshoot. So I think the Rockies will go ahead and take somebody to keep. Then again, if the right team comes calling with the right prospects that they make available, Rockies could very easily say, we'll draft this player for you, trade them to your organization, and then you trade us this prospect. So one way or another, I think on Wednesday at, I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern time. So by noon, I think the Rockies will have themselves a new young player on their roster that they do acquire because of the Rule 5 draft having the first overall pick, whether it's actually their own that they keep or if it's someone that they draft to then trade away. They're going to have somebody, no doubt about it. Has there been talk of a John Gray return? That question hasn't gone out there exactly. I think that is a fit for the Rockies. That very well could work out. Not clear if something like that can happen. Also in the chat, who's going to play third? Cal Caros? As of right now, it does sound like that's going to be the case. The Rockies have talked a lot about competition, right? Competition breeds a lot more productivity and better players and a better overall environment for players to earn their spot. I mean, DePodesta also talked about earning that spot of you're going to be the everyday guy. We're going to roll you out there and you're going to play every day. Ezequiel Tovar earned that right to play every single day. And despite the fact that he had a little up and down 2025, most of that due to being injured, he has earned the opportunity to play every single day and not have to worry about his spot. Same thing with a Brenton Doyle. Same thing with Hunter Goodman. Maybe you say that about Jordan Beck. Not entirely clear. He may need to earn it a little bit more in terms of the eyes of some of the new front office members for the Rockies. We'll wait and see what happens. So Cal Caros needs to earn that spot in more ways than one. So perhaps bringing in that Willie Castro, Ramon Arias, whatever it is type, is going to force Cal Caros to earn that spot, or at least protect him and set him up for more success in the majors. Whether or not that's as a platoon, we'll see what happens. But I think it is Cal Caros' job to lose regardless. What do you say about Ryan Ritter in the chat? Funny you mentioned that. So Paul DePodesta felt very confident about the situation at second base, saying we feel really good. Talked about them liking internal options. Of course, that being Ryan Ritter and Adiel Amador. I still think there could be a lot left in the tank for Adiel Amador in terms of being a slightly above average second baseman all around. I think he's still young enough. There's still that potential in there. So we'll see what happens. But as somebody floated during our conversation in the suite, there could be a third player in the equation at second base whose skill set, at least offensively, could fit really nice at second base. And that, of course, is Tyler Freeman. He played a lot more second base when he was with Cleveland. I think at the beginning of this year, this past season, he was more of that second base type before moving to right field, where he hadn't played right field very much before. So if he goes back to second base, that contact could play a lot better. I think he needs to really step up his defense. That could be the concern there. But how much is that Paul DePodesta really just trying to showcase that there's confidence in the roster? And so therefore, your free agent that you're shopping or your player that you're trying to trade, we don't need you because we've got Ritter, Amador, and Freeman. And that's going to really, really help the Rockies in their negotiations to avoid, getting fleeced or to avoid having to overpay. And it's nice to know that the Rockies are in these conversations. Calls are going both ways. And, the Rockies are listening on players. That was another one of the questions that I asked Paul DePodesta is anybody untouchable? And he said, look, we're not in a position right now to not listen to offers on everyone. Doesn't mean they're actually going to do that. It also has to be a good fit, has to be a win for the Rockies and their future. So I think it's probably unlikely that we see a trade of that magnitude. The one exception right now I think would be Brenton Doyle. DePodesta said there's a lot to like there, and I think we all know that under normal circumstances, like we saw in 2024, and even through much of the second half, you saw who Brenton Doyle is, and I think he's going to be able to get back to that. But there was, I'm not sure if you saw on MLB.com an article written by Mike Petriello about there being a shortage of right-handed hitting outfielders. Since the shift went away and the shift was banned, we're seeing a lot more at-bats go to left-handed hitting outfielders because now those balls they were hitting to the right side that were a 4-3 put out with the second baseman in shallow right field, now those are becoming base hits, or they're base hits up the middle. So teams that are interested in acquiring a right-handed hitting outfielder, teams like the Royals, first and foremost, they're looking to add a right-handed hitting outfielder, and Brenton Doyle checks that box, especially for the Royals, who play in the largest outfield in the American League. So Brenton Doyle, I think the market for him is going to be really, really high. And if the Rockies are serious about this rebuild, despite the fact that Brenton Doyle does still have 4 more years of team control, so he should be around through the end of the 2029 season when, by that point, you think the Rockies are going to be pretty good, right? Not pretty good, like 90 win pretty good, but like they're going to have worked out a lot of kinks. They're going to have a lot of answers for the glaring questions that they've created themselves over the last 4+ years. And so they're going to be in and around 500. So they're going to be a wild card contender at that point. Don't you want Brenton Doyle around? But it would only be for that 1 year of 2029 or 2028, 2029. Also, by that point, he's in his 3rd and 4th year of arbitration. So he's no longer making the league minimum or a couple $1,000,000. Now he's going to be a lot closer to $10 million. So that's all part of the algorithm and part of the questions and that the Rockies' new front office has to answer and say, he's a fan favorite, but fans also like winning ball games. And so let's give them that. Right, let's give that to them. The fans is a more of a winning culture. Rockies want to change that culture, and this could be one of those ways of doing that. And that would be a change from how the Rockies have operated in the past, about making it more about the fan experience of that comfortability of knowing who's going to be in that lineup 1 through 9, or who the starting pitcher might be, versus just I don't know who's going to be in the lineup from day to day. But I know they're good. They're a good team, and they're going to be an exciting team. They're going to put the ball in play, and they have a good chance to win today. That's what I care more about than being familiar with, half or 3/4 of a roster. That's where I think we could see this regime shift, right? This culture shift as to what's important for the Colorado Rockies. Pitching and altitude was a discussion. How much of a mad scientist are you? I think it might have been Drew Goodman that asked that question. And very open-minded is ultimately what we heard from Paul DePodesta. Everything is on the table. And I think we're seeing that with the decision for the Rockies in adding a pitching coach, a big one, a name you might not be familiar with, Alon Leichman, who was the assistant pitching coach for the Miami Marlins last year, was with the Cincinnati Reds in 2023 and 24 in that same assistant pitching coach role. Before that, he was a minor league pitching coach for the Mariners, and lo and behold, back in 2022, was the pitching coach in the Arizona Fall League the same year that Warren Schaeffer managed the Salt River Rafters. So a little bit of a connection there between Leichman and Warren Schaeffer. Now, Leichman was a part of some innovation last year with the Miami Marlins. Both he and the pitching coach, Daniel Moscos, were calling pitches from the dugout late in the season, which is a rarity amongst MLB teams. And Jansen Junk even went out and was outstanding against the Texas Rangers late in September in the middle of a 7-game win streak that actually saw the Marlins sweep the Rockies in 3. Marlins finished out the year 12-4, trying something different over the final few weeks of the season, and it seemed to work wonders. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to work here in Colorado, in Denver, at Coors Field, but it just goes to show that this gentleman, Alon Leichman, who has a very interesting background, first and only coach from Israel, born and raised there. But Leichman was a part of innovation in Miami. Rockies are looking for more innovation right now, and Leichman could be that answer. So certainly not the traditional old school baseball coach or pitching coach or hitting coach we've seen the Rockies go with in the past. Now they are trying to, and according to sources, are going to acquire, sign, hire Alon Leichman to be their pitching coach, a young pitching coach on the rise. So again, another change for the Rockies that's very interesting. That's making you think, okay, the Rockies are doing things differently right now. They're doing a lot of different things. One of the final questions that I had for Paul DePodesta, who talked about Tovar being an important piece and that up the middle of Goodman, Tovar, Doyle, which is very good. Also touched on Jordan Beck getting to, another level despite, some varied success, right? In the majors this past year. DePodesta pointing out that in his 10 years since he left baseball, that jump from AAA to the majors has never been a higher jump. It's never been more difficult. And the goals for 2026, according to Paul DePodesta, is building an infrastructure. And I think that has to be the number one priority off the field more than on the field. Then again, the off the field situation, the behind the scenes stuff, that is going to impact on the field. It's just going to take some time to do that. We're not going to see a lot of that in 2026 immediately. And that's the one thing I would push back on for any fans who might be irritated if there is going to be a fourth season of 100 losses. And right now, it's still with a lot to go, but we're not there yet. That hasn't happened. What has happened so far is still not enough to say the Rockies are not going to lose 100 games next year. The roster's not there. But there is an infrastructure there that could take much of the roster right now and make them a team that wins 63 or more games in 2027. So if the roster changes in 2026, maybe they become a 63-win team in 2026. And then in 2027, we look for them to make that jump into the 70s. And all of a sudden, 2028, you're going, okay, if you're around 500, you're also around the final wildcard spot. You saw the Cincinnati Reds get in with only 83 wins. It is possible. It is very much possible. But my last question that I asked was about the Rockies getting in on the market over in Asia because they've not been players. They've not had boots on the ground. And Japan and Korea are baseball hotbeds. And we're seeing not just players that are Japanese coming out of the NPB or Korean players coming out of the KBO, but we're also seeing American-born players who go over to the KBO or the NPB and have a lot of success and then come back to the States to sign rather lucrative contracts. And the Rockies, because they don't have a presence right now in Asia, they're missing out on an opportunity, and they need to get better at player acquisition in every way possible. This would be one of those ways. So DePodesta is saying, they want to ramp up those efforts on the international side of things. In the chat, Felix Wild the Innocent, appreciate you guys over there. I did want to talk more about Barry Larkin, but I'm going to get to that another day. Really made a compelling case as to why Orlando deserves to have a major league franchise. I still think they're on the outside looking in, but he said enough of the right things to suggest that maybe Major League Baseball could come to Orlando at some point. Might not be expansion, might be more like a relocation, but a lot of compelling things coming out of the mouth of Barry Larkin to change my perspective. Is it enough to change Major League Baseball's perspective, or or the owner of a team looking to make more money elsewhere in whatever city that they are currently in. That remains to be seen, but I'll have to talk about that another day this week. At Patrick D. Lyons on X, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB on TikTok and Blue Sky. Appreciate everybody dropping by here on the Rockies Insider channel on YouTube. There's nothing fancy behind me, unfortunately. This is just the wall of the media room. So you're not seeing anybody walking by, any players, any coaches, other reporters. So you're not really missing out if you're listening to this one on the audio. Not to say that my home studio is that much better, but maybe not what you were hoping for when I said I was going live from the winter meetings. It's just a wall. That's about it. So appreciate you dropping by. Appreciate all of your momentum. But unfortunately, as you know, it's only as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you tomorrow.